Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Monday Mentor. I'm Jen Whitmer, and I help teams and leaders solve conflict, cultivate communication, and create empowered teams. So work is a joy, and people are whole, and your organization flourishes. And today, like every Monday, I have a great guest who's coming to share some fantastic leadership advice with us. And today we have Ivy Malik, and I am so excited about this new friend. She is a brand and sales strategist. She works really specifically with creatives and people who are creative in their business. And I cannot wait for her to offer some really fantastic advice around the mindset of an expert and how that improves our leadership. So let's welcome Ivy.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am so happy to meet you and interview you today. I'm just really excited about all the wisdom you have to offer us. So before we jump into all that kind of goodness, tell us, how did you get here? A little bit about your story. How did you arrive at being this fantastic sales strategist and brand expert specifically for creatives? What is this
Yeah.
journey?
So it started back in the days right before I went to university. I said to my father I wanted to become a film director. And my father said to me, why don't you go get yourself a real degree? And for all those creatives out there, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, that's me too. They wanted me to
Totally.
do something real. And like a good, I'm half Asian. So, like a good half Asian girl, I listened to my father and I got myself a degree in psychology instead.
Hmm.
So, the university years passed. I hung out with all of my friends who were creatives because obviously I wanted to do creative things. I befriended the illustrators, the designers, and all the architects and, the world of the university. And did what most people did from Edinburgh University, went down to London, got a job in the corporate sector, and did the whole 9 to 5 thing. And then I met a guy who asked me, like so typical,
Right.
who asked me about my dreams and aspirations. And I'm like, oh, I really wanted to open up a restaurant. I wanted to have my own cafe, uh, my own space where creatives can come and hang out and exchange ideas. And he asked me this amazing question, which nobody had asked me before, which was, well, why haven't you done it yet? And that question is so simple, but it blew my mind
Yes.
because most other people, they normally say, well, oh, yeah, that'd be so cool. Yeah, great. Oh, yeah, but this, it'd be like that. They dream with you. But he didn't dream with me. He asked me, well, what's the next step,
Yeah.
essentially?
Yeah.
So I did that. And within like 3 or 4 months, I had secured funding and I got my first space. I think it took about a year for everything to actually open up because it took about 6 months to build. Open up my restaurant, and it became that creative space that I wanted it to be. While I obviously had all my creative friends graduating from university, they were, some of them were doing masters and stuff. So they would come to me post graduation and talk to me about their woes of, I can't seem to be getting paid for the work
Mm.
that I do. They're undervaluing me. And it really pained me to see my friends not getting paid for good work that they're doing.
Yes.
So I started helping them for free, obviously. And then their friends would come to me and I would then stand in as maybe their agent or maybe um, accounts receivable. I would literally like pretend to be part of their business so that they would get paid or I would negotiate on their part. And this I did for fun because it just brought me so much joy. My business was doing well. It was fine. So this was like not even a side hustle. I would just say this was a side passion project that I was working with. I would just charge a nominal fee. Fast forward to present day, I sold that business, 10 years in that business, helping creatives on the side. And then I've now been doing it full time. So my start is a weird one from get yourself a real degree, but feeling the absence of
Mhm.
that creativity or like the art side of me. Yeah.
Yes.
So That's how I became.
There's so many good parts of your story that I just like, oh, I want to pick out. Like, so if you're listening and you've ever been told, what are you going to do with that degree or go to a real degree? An undergrad is in music ed. And so like, I totally get that creative space, and my dad saying to me, but what are you going to do with that? I'm like, there's only one music teacher in a school. Like, how are you going to get a job? And anyway, so I identify with that. And I think a lot of people have that feeling when they're, it's hard at 18 to think, what do I want to do? And how do I live this passion? And I love that your story has figured it out, that you could get there anyway by really helping other people.
Yes.
That's the way we succeed, is really helping others solve their problems. And that twisted, windy path, I think, is really valuable. So if you're listening and you're either a creative entrepreneur or maybe you're in the corporate space, the twisted, windy path is actually really normal. Most people aren't like, I did this and I did this and I did this. That's not the norm. And so you're in the right spot and in really good company if you're still figuring out what do you want to do when you grow up. And so I think I love that part of your story. So one of the things I really want to get out of you today, and so much of your work has been helping people set themselves up as an expert. And I have a little story, but I just want to ask you to define expert first. So when you're talking about an expert, what is that? How do you define that space?
So the way I see an expert is someone who knows a lot about something. Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of knowledge in an area of, let's say, business, or an area of like a surgeon. A surgeon would be an expert. They would have expert knowledge in one little thing. They don't know how to diagnose every disease, but they know how to diagnose one, or oh my gosh, I can't speak today. They know how.
Listen, I lose words all the time, and I'm a professional speaker. It happens.
Yeah. So it's about knowing a lot about a little. That would be the best way to actually explain what an expert is. Because we cannot know everything. It's impossible. And
Absolutely.
that's where I kind of tell people, well, why don't you kind of define yourself a little bit more in one area so that you understand that and see so many different scenarios and perspectives within this one little area, so that you have a lot of expertise building within you. The experience will give you the expertise needed to tackle every single scenario that you might come across. It's actually really simple. That's the way, I see it as a very simple thing.
Well, it's such a great definition, because I think as we continue talking, it's the mindset piece of that that's actually much harder.
Yes.
So my speaker coach one time really challenged me around the words about expert and thought leader. And it was the noun of it, like the identity piece of it, that was really terrifying to me. And I could easily say I have expertise in the Enneagram, which is a personality framework. I have expertise in conflict. I have expertise in leadership. I have experience in those places. But to call myself an Enneagram expert, or to call myself a thought leader in leadership, was terrifying to me. I had to do some work. Like, my particular story is because some of the experts were harmful to me, and I didn't want to be the one that harmed other people. And so I think the work that I've done around the mindset of an expert has been really powerful for me. So I'm curious how you help the creative that comes to you and is like, well, I'm not an expert. How do you help them shift away from that, I'm not an expert, over to kind of owning it? And how do you help them through that?
I think the first question that comes up for me for you is, when you said I'm an expert, what was it that was coming up for you that was producing the resistance, apart from what you just shared? Were there other things?
That's a great question. And for me, the resistance was old stories, as often is the case. And when I'm working with leaders, there's always an old story that tries to take over. And sometimes it's so old, we don't even notice that it's there. It's just part of the groove. And my old story was, who do you think you are? Like, you don't get to be the center of attention. You don't need to be the know-it-all. You don't need to be the bossy one. And so working through that old story, and kind of coaches working with me on, who told you that? And how do you know that that's true? And is it true anymore? And working through some of that. But that friction, that initial resistance was all about that old story of you're too much and you're just trying to be the center of attention. Like that was the resistance in that piece. Because if you're an expert, as you know, particularly a woman in the world, there is that, well, who do you think you are kind of story. So that was my experience.
And that's kind of where we start. We always start with your experience. Like, what is it that you are experiencing in that moment when you're defining yourself as the expert? Because when we break that down and understand how the mind is working, then we know where the work is. When you asked me this question, something else came up for me. And it was, well, am I saying I'm better than anybody else? And that's similar, but different way of actually voicing it. So what does that say about me? I'm just, going through the thought process of what happens, right? So if I proclaim myself as an expert, then that means that someone else is worse, not as good as me. And who am I? Same thing. Who am I to say that I'm better than everybody else? So understanding the thought processes that you have and reconciling them and accepting them so that you can process them and then either shift your perspective, say like, well, I do have a lot of experience. I do come from a place where I know a lot, and there can be many experts. There can be many experts in the same space. It does not mean that you are better than anybody else. It just simply means that you have more knowledge than anybody else. What you do with that expertise as an expert is what is going to matter more. But the being an expert is attractive first and foremost. So how do you illustrate that? How do you show that you're an expert? That's kind of like how I would navigate that conversation.
Yeah, I love so much about that. It's so much how, as I'm helping leaders in that space, especially in corporate leadership, they sometimes have to be all things to all people, and it can be draining and exhausting. And they're trying to live outside of their natural giftings, skill sets, and areas of expertise. But when they start to shift and are like, it's okay that I'm the expert in this and I don't know that, it's so empowering for their team, because then their team is like, I'm the expert in that. And so it becomes this excellent recipe together where you make something great. But it does really take that owning, I do know a lot about this topic, and that doesn't mean other people don't know more, or it doesn't increase my worth as a human, which is, I think, the other thing we get caught up in is like, if I say that I'm better, then does that naturally mean somebody else is worse? No, there's room for everybody. There can be many experts. And so it makes me wonder, how do you help people see their special brand of expertise? Who you are, Ivy, and there's lots of brands and sales strategists, but you, Ivy, do it in a really specific way that's different than others. So how do you help people marry that?
Yeah. Before I answer that question, I want to say one more thing.
Sure, absolutely.
So whenever we talk about being an expert, it also sometimes feels finite. Like, I have now mastered it. And to some that might, and this may not be everyone, but it may be some of you, where you feel like, well, if I say I'm an expert, what else can I learn? I'm done. Then it doesn't feel like a growth mindset. And I think that is one element that can be frustrating for people.
Yes. And I think that it's definitely a story that we tell ourselves. And what I continue to find with the people who are the experts that I follow, the ones who I would say my mentors from afar, on the topics that I teach on, they're constantly learning. They're constantly doing new things. And so for me, it was that mindset shift of, not so much, this isn't a growth mindset, but every expert is always learning more, because things change and we continue to see how our expertise applies in a new situation, in a new space. And so I love that you brought that up. That's really important.
A lot of people also there's some feedback. Can you hear that? I just wondered if you have it.
I'm not hearing it. So hopefully it's good. Sorry, friends.
Hopefully it's good.
Let us know if you can hear it.
If you see me getting a little bit confused, it's because the feedback. Okay, I think it's gone away now, which is good.
Okay, good.
You asked a question, which I want to answer. How do I work with my clients to find their expertise?
Mm-hmm. And they're special, like the marrying of their expertise and who they are as a human in the world.
Yeah, so I start with who they are as a human. I start with a
Mm-hmm.
self. I think it's
Yeah.
so important to become self-aware and
Yes.
to have self-acceptance. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a long process. A lot of people just want a solution in 1 minute, in 1 hour, in one session. I'm like, you've come here after being conditioned all your life to have to behave a certain way, to do certain things that is not even you. You don't know who you are yet. Let's
Mm-hmm.
find out who you are and what it is that you want to do. I always start in the center. And one of the tools that I use is human design, which is why I was excited to meet you,
Yes.
because you use Enneagrams, right?
Yes.
I find it so easy to use a blueprint like this, whether it's Enneagram, whether it's human design or Myers-Briggs, any one of those that can help you see yourself, understand yourself. I love them
Yes.
because it's a tool. All at the end of the day, it's a tool to just allow yourself to self-reflect and accept who you are and to be okay. I mean, that's what
Yes.
acceptance is, to be okay with it and that you are different. You're not going to be the same as someone else. You're going to learn differently. You're going to communicate differently, and you may not want to be around lots of people all the time. You and your iteration is just okay. And now let's find out what it is that you love and you want to do so that we can find that special something that we can highlight that they didn't want to highlight. That's the way.
Yes. I mean, like, I kind of want to stand and applaud because that's the same way that I approach working with leaders, because you have to start with you as a leader. And one of the things I say a lot is you can only lead as far as you've healed. And you have to look at
Love that.
yourself to start with, who am I in this world? Because that's how you can't begin with a skill or you're in the wrong position. Like, you can apply, lots of people can, have communication skills, but if you don't know how you show up at the table as a communicator, that
Yeah.
skill becomes less effective. And that is why in my model of helping organizations and leaders, I start with the leader. That's how we have to start. And so who you are as a human and your values and the stories you tell yourself and your personality. And as you use human design and I'm using the Enneagram, it's that same, like you said, I love the idea of blueprint. I always call it kind of shortcut or
Yeah.
a little bit of a map that helps
I love
you
that.
before you, like, you don't have to rediscover it all, but that self-reflection tool helps you, because self-reflection is so hard.
Yeah.
It gives us that space to understand who we are and how we show up. And so I love it so much. So I really want, before we close up, because we're getting so close to time, I would love for you to talk a little bit about how having this mindset of an expert, knowing who you are, claiming your expertise, how does that help you in business? How does that help you as a creative entrepreneur? How does that help you as a leader in an organization? Why is that so important to success?
It's about trust building. When it comes down to it, if you can illustrate expertise, let's just leave it at expertise for now so that there's no friction. If you can illustrate expertise and do as you say, so follow through with what you say with the action, something about leadership roles now, then you're going to build trust. And when you have trust, everyone will follow you. Like, why would they not follow you if you say something and then follow through? But if the problem is, you cannot have knowledge about everything. And if you pretend to know something and then you actually don't, and there's another expert in the audience who, like, wait a second, I know this and you're wrong. If you pretend to be knowledgeable about an area and you're not, then that's going to decrease trust. So I think at the end of the day, it's about building trust.
Oh, that's so important. I mean, as an entrepreneur, you're building trust with, yes, I can help you. Like, because they're buying a service or your product that is helping them do something. And as a creative in particular, sometimes those things are so intangible and it's really hard to prove it. So when you build trust first with yourself, that's self-trust, that I know what I'm doing, and then you can build trust with your client, people are going to hire you over and over and over again. And I think as a corporate leader, that's why all of these, Patrick Lencioni, who's an organizational psychologist, talks about trust as the foundation, the speed of trust from Covey. Like everybody's like, ooh, how do we get to trust?
Yeah.
And it is such a great point that that's actually what's helping you by knowing who you are and knowing what you know. I think that's so valuable. Oh my goodness. You've just been so great. I'm so glad to talk to you. So it's time for us to wrap up. I would love for you to tell the people where they can find you, how they can connect with you. There's some more about your website here, but invite us into your world and tell us how to connect with you.
Well, I am on LinkedIn by Ivy Malik. And if you're on Instagram as well, I'm a lot more active there because there's stories that I share. So if you're on Instagram, then Ivy Malik Official, send me a DM, let's chat. It's fun to connect with people who are actually watching this. So thank you for having me, Jen.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad that you were here, and just such a lovely way to talk about something that can be really scary. Like the idea of expertise and a mindset can be just whenever we are approaching change, there's, like you said, there's that friction there. And so it's just such a gentle way of bringing us in. And I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So join us next week. I am here every week at 1 p.m. interviewing somebody. Sometimes it's me solo. Next week we have Kate. And so we are excited to have her and giving you just little leadership advice that can help you serve your team better, serve yourself better, and be a great human in the world. So we're glad that you are watching and hope you join us next week. Ivy, thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.